O he no neia no huo e lili ulani ke kuini I ponia no Hawaii. He leina ni o e kalahui o ka hulu o memele nei. Ka pipi o mai a ke anue nue ke ka hiko nani o e kalani. O ike mai ana I ka nani na vai ho'olu a ka like ole. Ahui hoi ka ahula o ke kahiko nani o Hawaii. Eia Hawaii ke kune I ke au hoi o ke kolohe. O ka lohe hoi o ke ola o ke kuli hoi e ka pilikia. Au hea ka kou e kalahui e nono I pono I ke akua.
We are the breath of this land and national parks. Listen, and you will hear our ancestors at national parks. We are indigenous to these lands, the original caretakers, the stories that tie all this land together. We are our ancestors. We will not be forgotten.
Hello, my name is David Ono, and welcome to the second annual Tadaima, a community virtual pilgrimage hosted by Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages and the National Park Service. I am delighted to welcome you to this year's opening ceremony. We began the ceremony by acknowledging the sovereign nations whose land is currently occupied by Pearl Harbor National Memorial and by the 10 concentration camps administered by the War Relocation Authority during World War II: Manzanar, Tule Lake, Hart Mountain, Minidoka, Amachi, Gila River, Poston, Topaz, Rower, and Jerome. These historic sites are integral pieces of Japanese-American incarceration history, but they're also located on land stolen through settler colonialism and genocide from sovereign indigenous nations. As we gather together virtually over the next 4 weeks, we have the opportunity as a community to continue telling our stories in our own words while also paying attention to the ways that these stories intersect with other communities. We hope that Tadaima 2021 will be an opportunity to think together about how our community storytelling can uplift and celebrate other communities, and to listen to indigenous voices in particular. By sharing our own stories and by actively listening to the stories of others, we can cultivate a community that strives for understanding. And we would like to take this moment to thank the indigenous leaders who helped to make these land acknowledgements possible. Thank you to Kana'i Gomes of the Kanaka Maoli, the native Hawaiian people, for crafting an ole to honor Pu'uloa and help us acknowledge the land. And thank you to our Mapuana Paya A'ala Shizuko Hayashi Simpliciano of Kanaka Maoli and Ainu in Diaspora Peoples, Executive Director of the nonprofit Ancestral Connections and co-founder of the Ainu and Ainuic Heritage Education Society, for your indispensable contributions to this event. Thank you to the Council for Indigenous Relevance, Communication, Leadership, and Excellence, and Employee Resource Group of the National Park Service, for your invaluable contributions. We are so grateful to all of you for sharing your wisdom and artistic vision with us, and for your hard work and dedication to bringing our communities together in such a thoughtful, impactful, and meaningful way. And we would like to encourage each of you watching at home to research the tribes on whose land you live and to find ways to give back to the communities most vulnerable to the ongoing economic, environmental, and physical violence caused by settler colonialism. To begin learning about whose land you're on, a good place is the website below. While not an academic or legal resource, this website, run by Native Land Digital, provides a helpful introduction to reconceptualizing and deepening how we think about land, nations, borders, and hopefully, solidarity. Now please welcome Kana'i Gomes, who will explain the Kanaka Maoli oral tradition and provide some context for the ole, or chant, that you saw at the start of the ceremony.
Lili'ulei Akalahui is one of the lesser-known chants in honor of Queen Lili'uokalani. She was the last reigning monarch of the Kingdom of Hawaii. She reigned from 1891 to 1893. Queen Lili'uokalani was the sister of King David Kalakaua, who encouraged Japanese immigration to Hawaii. After invasion by foreign forces, Queen Lili'uokalani was imprisoned in a room in her palace around 1895, when this chant was written by an individual by the name W. Ole Pau. It is believed that this name was a pen name which was common practice at the time. This chant and thousands like it were published in the many different Hawaiian language newspapers that were around at that time. This chant is performed in a style known as ho'ai'ai and has a loving yet somber intonation. This chant speaks first of the love of the land Native Hawaiians have, land forcibly annexed on January 17, 1893, and also speaks of their love and support for Queen Lili'uokalani during this challenging and devastating time in Hawaiian history. At this time, Native Hawaiians were not only dealing with forced annexation and loss of autonomy, they were also dealing with mass epidemics, which were claiming hundreds and thousands of Native Hawaiians with seemingly no end in sight. The last two stanzas of this chant are as appropriate in 1895 as it is in 2021. And I'll translate it vaguely in English. Here is Hawaii before you in this time of despair. Obedience brings life, and disregard brings about trouble. Listen, my people, appeal for what is right from God. This chant illustrates the natural inclination towards a quiet strength and hope that Hawaiians still have till this day. Keep your responsibilities to each other at the forefront of your mind, and errors will be corrected as a matter of course. The truth will see the light. It is important that these chants continue to live, not just on paper and in newspapers, but in actual voices of our people, where life begins.
Thank you, Kana'i, for that beautiful explanation of your Oli. It is an honor to open this year's Tadaima with such a profound and meaningful performance. Tadaima means I'm home in Japanese. Tadaima is also a reminder that home is wherever we are most comfortable, the place where we are supported, respected, and loved. Our home as a community is open to anyone who is seeking understanding, anyone who is willing to listen, regardless of your connection to these stories. And like any home, we all have a responsibility to each other and to ourselves to live in our authentic truths, to make this a safe home, one of acceptance, support, and healing, to continue our own journeys, and to uplift each other along the way. Last year, Tadaima focused on virtual community building through an in-depth exploration of the histories of wrongful incarceration of hundreds of thousands of Nikkei, or those of Japanese ancestry, living outside of Japan. Nearly 80 years ago, in the aftermath of the attack on Pearl Harbor, but building on decades of anti-Asian sentiment, entire Nikkei communities were forcibly removed from their homes and incarcerated. This year, Tadaima's programming will continue to explore this complex history from as many perspectives as possible, while also learning and leaning into the unexpected ways that our histories overlap with the histories of other communities of color. As we've witnessed again over the course of this past year, learning from the past in order to reach across lines of community and generation to build true and lasting solidarity is more important than ever. This year, amidst the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we have witnessed calls to action protesting centuries of colonization, police brutality, genocide, and environmental destruction. Indigenous water and land protectors across the globe came together to protest natural resource exploitation in an effort to protect the land and water for us and for future generations. Many of us have seen the violence endured, especially by Black and Indigenous peoples, at the hands of the state. Rather than go numb or feel apathetic, we have witnessed and participated in more and stronger calls for justice. We have heard the cries of Indigenous peoples in pursuit of justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and for Two-Spirit people. This epidemic of violence against Indigenous people caused in part by labor camps for the same construction projects that violate sovereign treaty rights, destroy ecosystems, and poison our waters. We have seen the unjust detention of migrants and the separation of families. We grieve the Indigenous communities who continue the decades-long fight to recover generations of stolen children who were subjected to unimaginable brutality and murder by the residential school system. Though some of us remain unaware of the violence, abuse, genocide, and forced cultural assimilation Indigenous peoples continue to experience, we hope that our time together during Tadaima 2021 will help us to shed light on these stories and build bridges across our communities. To our Indigenous communities worldwide, we see you, we hear your pain, we feel your sorrow, and we will never stop fighting for you. Despite the seemingly impossible odds that we face, it is important for us to remember that change is not an impossible task. A different, more just world is possible. And our optimism, our faith in each other, our unique cultural knowledge, our resilience, our strength, these are the things that will guide us to a better tomorrow, to a future of true equity and freedom for all. Don't believe me? Look to our ancestors. There is a rich legacy of solidarity in communities of color, especially in our Nikkei community, of rallying together to fight injustice. This coalition building and activism is directly responsible for the successes of social movements throughout history. The nature and name of oppression may change shape over time, but it often retains the same behaviors. By looking at our shared histories, by sharing our experiences and knowledge, by unifying under a common goal, we can accomplish much more than we think. We would like to use this year's pilgrimage as an opportunity to solidify our unity by strengthening connections with other communities marginalized by systemic racism and persistent colonialist structures. Our differences make us stronger, not weaker. And building solidarity across our communities is key to our collective success. The systems that perpetuate dehumanization, violence, and genocide against communities of color can be dismantled, but only if we unite and fight for justice together. With this in mind, please give an extra special welcome to Asian American Studies pioneer and our community auntie, Carrie Morita, as she tells us a little more about the history that brought us here today and the lessons that we can all take with us.
Thank you, David. Hello, I'm Carrie Morita. Thank you for joining us today. Memorial pilgrimages began as an effort to unearth the largely unknown histories of Japanese American incarceration. In 1969, a group of Nikkei students, mostly Sansei or third-generation Japanese Americans, from Los Angeles set out to find the camps that their elders talked about at family gatherings and community events, but that their history books failed to mention. The pilgrimage to Manzanar was a spark that ignited a movement, setting off a wave of activism that created opportunities for truth-telling and demands for redress, which made possible an official apology from the U.S. government nearly 20 years later. It fueled the fire that has sustained decades of organizing and began a tradition of pilgrimages to the sites that once imprisoned our families behind barbed wire. Today, these pilgrimages live on as we gather together to share stories, to heal decades of intergenerational trauma, and to look outward. Our story begins with the Issei, the first generation of immigrants from Japan in the 1800s. Their stories vary widely, from plantation laborers to picture brides to business owners, all arriving in the U.S. in the aftermath of the Chinese Exclusion Act and amidst virulent anti-Asian sentiment. The Johnson-Reed Act, which halted immigration from Asia to the U.S. in 1924, is just one example of countless U.S. policies that codified discrimination on the basis of race in an attempt to construct a nation on a foundation of white supremacy. And this wasn't the first or last racist federal policy Nikkei faced. In 1942, Executive Order 9066 made possible the forced removal and incarceration of over 120,000 Nikkei from the West Coast. Despite this history of exclusion, removal, and incarceration, the Nikkei community has not just survived, we have thrived. But it has certainly not been easy. Throughout U.S. history, racial propaganda in the media has worked hand in hand with government policies to isolate communities of color from each other, using a divide and conquer strategy to maintain the status quo. During World War II, propaganda dehumanized Nikkei and pitted us against indigenous communities by circulating the lie that indigenous tribes agreed to host concentration camps. In the years after World War II, Japanese American communities were labeled model minorities, rhetorically and literally used to punish other communities of color, particularly Black folks. Today, we see these same tactics used to alienate groups based on their nationality, language, and religion in an effort to keep us divided. But these divisions were not created by us and are not reflective of our own legacy as Nikkei. Our Nikkei community has a rich history of solidarity, of joining other ethnic groups to fight discrimination, violence, and the violation of civil liberties. From the multi-ethnic plantation laborers of 1920s Hawaii who banded together against exploitative labor practices, to the draft resistors and no-nos in the camps who resisted the government's efforts to justify incarceration on the basis of so-called loyalty, to the student activists of the 1960s and 70s who participated in the Black freedom struggle and anti-war movements, to Nikkei today, who continue to fight migrant detention, exclusionary immigration policies, and the separation of families throughout history and today. Nikkei have fought oppression in its many forms, standing in solidarity with like-minded individuals, regardless of their background. As new generations of Nikkei step up to continue telling our stories and working for change, they continue the tradition of building solidarity, serving as allies in civil rights and environmental issues. They remind us that an injustice against one of us is an injustice against us all. While we tell our own truths over the next 4 weeks, it is also important for us to uplift the voices of other marginalized communities. Over the next 4 weeks, I encourage you to keep an open mind, listen to those around you, and share your own stories. To all of you joining us today, Nikkei or not, we encourage you to learn about your own family history, about your ancestors, and about the many facets that make up your identities and your communities. Take pride in yourself and the people you come from. We can and we must follow the legacy our ancestors have left us. By educating ourselves and by recognizing the ways that our stories intersect with others, we can create a better world for our future generations. There is never an easy or a convenient time to demand justice and equity, so now is as good a time as any. With this in mind, please welcome Kimiko as she tells us a bit more about what to expect from this year's virtual pilgrimage.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm Kimiko Marr, and I am normally not in front of the camera, but I'm welcoming you to Tadaima this year. Last year, we were here. We worked together to amplify the camp experience our elders spoke of in hushed tones, to shine a light about what camp actually meant within and beyond a U.S. context. We focus on providing a solid foundation of the histories of Japanese American incarceration by hearing as many voices and stories in as many different mediums as possible, from poetry to gardening to music to books and more. This year, we want to do even more. Over the next 4 weeks, our content will explore identity, intersectionality, and intergenerational trauma in an effort to build solidarity within, across, and beyond our Nikkei community. This year, you can expect both live and pre-recorded content with an emphasis on discussions exploring the ways our collective histories and identities overlap. We want to encourage the sharing of information in the hopes that we can create an even more diverse understanding of the Nikkei incarceration experience. Nikkei incarceration intersects with the histories of many different communities in the tactics used to remove and incarcerate Nikkei, in the land and buildings that house the concentration camps, and even in the authorities who held power over incarcerees. In order to fully understand this history and move forward to a place of healing, we think it is absolutely essential that we view these stories from as many perspectives as possible. Identity can mean many things. Our individual identities are made up of many pieces that shape who we are, how we see ourselves, and how others see us. Intersectionality is the understanding that human identity is made up of many characteristics, and no person can be fully described by just one category. These categories can include our ethnic background, our gender identities, our social or economic class, nationality, age, and so much more. Each of these factors are layers that make up who we are. In order to fully understand our own identities, we must acknowledge all the layers we are made of. The Nikkei community is one of intersectional identities. Our diaspora is a rich rainbow of diversity that cannot be categorized as any one thing, much like the broader human existence. The logo for Tadaima 2021, the sakura blossom with multicolored petals, is representative of the diversity that makes up our Nikkei community. Some of us are immigrants or the descendants of immigrants. Some of us are indigenous, Black, bilingual, or multicultural. We are all a product of our unique experiences. Each of our personal histories are made up of different factors, but we are all Nikkei.
Thank you, Kimiko. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to ravage communities worldwide, we come together once again to learn, grow, and find connection in a safe space. As infection rates continue to surge, we must all do our part to protect our most vulnerable from the devastating effects of this virus. By getting vaccinated, masking up, maintaining physical distance from others, and washing our hands, we can keep our loved ones safe. Now more than ever, it is important for us to care for ourselves and each other. We would like to take this moment to extend a warm thank you to all the frontline staff, healthcare professionals, and essential workers who have been working throughout this pandemic to ensure our safety and well-being. Thank you for keeping our community safe as we navigate this difficult and dangerous time. And we would like to thank all the activists, water and land protectors, and everyone putting their safety at risk to fight for climate justice and social reforms. We appreciate you finding new and innovative ways to protest injustice while keeping each other safe. Thank you for your bravery in fighting the injustices of today, so we all can experience a better tomorrow. And we'd also like to take this opportunity to address the stigma surrounding mental health. It is important for us to support each other and ask for help when we need it. This pilgrimage will tackle many issues that may be mentally and emotionally distressing. It is important that we honor the losses our communities have experienced and acknowledge the stress, depression, anxiety, and exhaustion caused not just by COVID, but also by systemic racism. It is normal to feel angry, depressed, and helpless in the face of the immense tragedies that we have and continue to experience. You're not alone. Our community is here for you. And we would now like to take a moment of silence to breathe and to honor those that we have lost to coronavirus, colonization, and the continued violence, oppression, and marginalization caused by institutionalized racism. We would like to honor the land and waters that house and care for us, the frontline workers that keep us safe and healthy, and the activists who continue to fight for justice and freedom around the world. Now, we have touched on quite a few things over the course of this opening ceremony, to gesture towards the expansiveness and depth of the programs that we'll be engaging with over the next few weeks. Before we bring this opening ceremony to close, though, we want to acknowledge that Tadaima 2021 is also coming at a time that has seen a renewed uptick in violence and racism against Asian Americans. While we want to name this violence and the ways that it has impacted our communities, we also want to highlight the strength, resilience, protest, and joy that have emerged, not unlike the same forms of strength, resilience, protest, and joy that our ancestors modeled for us. And it is imperative to remember that the violence and racism experienced by Asian Americans in the midst of this pandemic cannot be untangled from the forces of imperialism, anti-Blackness, capitalism, and the military-industrial complex that affect communities of color in the United States and across the globe. With that in mind, we want to bring in the words and music of another member of our Japanese-American community, Kaoru Ishibashi, who many of you probably know as the musical artist Kishi Bashi. On a new song released earlier this year, Kishi Bashi beautifully captures the heartbreak and the hope of the moment in which we find ourselves. Here to share a few words, and the song itself is Kishi Bashi.
Hi. Thank you so much for listening to my song. This is about the feelings of being a minority in this country. You see, you're on the outside looking in or looking up to a place that you're really not accepted. And I think it's also painful in a way like romance is. You know, you long to be desired, you pine for someone, and ultimately you're not accepted. Unrequited love. And they're very similar in the way that they're very painful. So, thank you.
I had a moment with you. A second past, nothing more you cared of you. I heard the sound of your sigh. There was nothing to you. Could have laughed at it all, but nothing more, not a cave in which to crawl. Took it all to the rest, and I bet it on you. There's a pause for a second to remember the very words I'd written them with symbols from a memory that occurred. There was a time, there was a place for us, for every voice that never sang, for everyone I trust. I am with you. I belong with you. Can't wait for when the world can be a better place. Countless hours to embrace with you. I am a stranger today. I'm a shadow with a darker shade of grey. In the bright noonday sun, I will wither away. Many faces are new, they're not the same, but they're all the same to you. In the sea of it all, I was waving to you. In the middle of this ocean, in the deepest of the beds, I had written down a poem that you never could have read. There's a time, there's a place for us, for every voice that never sang, for everyone I trust. I am with you. I belong with you. Can't wait for when the world can be a better place, with countless hours to embrace with you.
That concludes our opening ceremony, and we would like to thank you all for joining us, and we hope that you will enjoy all the activities and performances that will be available this month. The Pilgrimage Committee, in cooperation with the National Park Service, has worked tirelessly to create this space for us to share our stories and grow together. Thank you to all our sponsors, our partners, and all those who have provided content for making this pilgrimage a reality. If you need assistance, want to access last year's program, or would like to learn more about upcoming programs, visit the Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimage website for more information. We hope that all of you watching at home are safe and healthy, regardless of where you come from or your ties to this history. We look forward to having you with us for this year's Tadaima program.
Tadaima, I have returned home. For far too long I have felt all alone. O Kairi, I see and feel your history. Know that you are welcome in this shelter to be free. I'm not the enemy, solid and strong, he never said it. But when he told his story deep in his eyes, I read it. The irony is he considered himself lucky. Ugly were times for Nikkei in this country. And finally it struck me, how could they be so unjust to a boy who loved baseball with a rice bowl haircut? That's what happened back then. If you look like us, guilty without legal due process, families incarcerated in dust, from Tule Lake to Manzanar, Honolulu roundup, a story not told in their books. Hold your head up high when you get those dirty looks as they stretch their eyes. But what you most despise, all the lies that eat away at your pride. Tadaima, I have returned home. For far too long I have felt all alone. O Kairi, I see and feel your history. Know that you are welcome in the shelter to be free. Bombs dropped on Pearl Harbor, the smoke is blinding. 17 sites in the islands were used for profiling. Uchina Kibe, a Shinto priestess, spoke broken English. And the children, they call it camp, but these were prisons that most Nikkei in Hawaii never had to live in. An abuse of privilege or survival. Lateral violence is when your kid is your rival. The no-no boys accused of disloyalty. Katonkin Buddha head, mainland versus Hawaii. The division is beside me. The rift is real. We need spaces that are safe to come together and heal. Tadaima, I have returned home. For far too long I have felt all alone. O Kairi, I see and feel your history. Know that you are welcome in this shelter to be free. Tadaima.